Okay, in this recording, we are going on to part 2 of our Focus Fatal 4, which is caught by or caught in between. We want to identify the major hazards of this type and also go over how we can prevent injuries related to. This is in the private, what are we saying? They've got pretty old statistics, but basically the private construction industry alone accounted for 92% of the caught in or caught between fatalities. So fatalities, and that's about 23% of the total. So this is an important issue in construction, and we just want to go and get your thinking in a way of what does that mean, and how, if I find myself in that situation, how am I going to go about making sure I'm safe? And not only for me, but the people around you as well. So let's go over some of the major types of caught in or between hazards in construction. And we have 3. They like to pick out 3. So first one we want to talk about is machinery that is unguarded, moving parts causing, your clothes to get entangled, or sleeves or something of that nature. So almost all site use machinery has the moving parts, rotating parts. And, there are some construction standards that require the point of contact to be guarded. So if machinery is not properly guarded or de-energized. So we're not only talking about machinery that is not properly guarded or de-energized, but we're going to cover that in another area. Okay, so when they're not guarded, of course, your clothing can become part of the machine and you get pulled into it. Okay, and so we want to make sure that doesn't happen. Okay, so that's one. Machinery that has been unguarded, on purpose. Sometimes we do that on purpose to make the work easier. We have some videos that we're going to want you to review. And again, there's a standard that says that machinery has to be properly guarded, especially at the point of contact. Okay, so caught in between, caught by hazard number 1, machinery not properly guarded or de-energized. 2, buried in or by, so cave-ins basically. And so what we talk about there are unprotected trenches and excavations. Okay, so the major hazard with that is basically, the 2016, 15, there was a real high concentration on, going out there on the site looking at excavation projects, because, that's a serious, 1 cubic yard of dirt is like 3,000 pounds. And so let that fall onto your chest. There's no way you will survive that. Okay, so cave-ins do crush you and suffocate you. Okay, and in addition to, the trench may have hazardous atmospheres and all of that. Once you go underground, there's a standard for that. That underground location, you have to test it. You have to make sure there's a way to identify if there is a water seepage. Once you do start to begin your excavation, so chemicals may go into the trenches. And so when we're talking about trenches and excavations, there are definite standards. And that's where we get really deep into the laws and the rules of OSHA when it comes to that, because those are very, very dangerous situations. Okay, so we talk about underground utilities. When we talk about excavation, we're talking about underground utilities. So you can face electrocution burns from all of the underwater piping that you may come in contact with, you may not know is there. So there are standards to make sure you're keeping yourself safe. Hello. All right, and last in our major types of caught in between hazards is when we become pinned between. Okay, and so they just give the different situations: pinned between equipment and a solid object, being pinned between materials being stacked. Okay, and so again, there's a standard for when a individual, a human, is near or around vehicle operations, equipment operations. Oh, I'm so sorry, I can't answer. There's a standard for that. And so in our specialty courses for vehicle standards, OSHA standards for vehicle operations, that would be covered there. Okay, and for pin between materials being stacked, material handling standard would cover that. Shoring and construction materials in a trench, excavation and material handling, depending on what we're talking about specifically, would handle that. So pinned between hazards, pinned between equipment and a solid object, pinned between materials being stacked, and pinned between shoring and construction materials in a trench. All right, so now let's talk about some of the caught in between prevention training. Okay, so so we talked about the hazard. So the solution to that hazard when we're talking about that machinery, one is make sure it's properly guarded. That's a construction standard that I'm gonna have you look that up. Okay. Protect yourself from being pinned between equipment, okay? Material handling standards, take care of all of that. And protect yourself from excavation sites. And then, of course, with all of these issues, your employer is required to train you, okay? And so really quickly, as far as the machinery, never remove a safety guard. That's where we get the problem, is that we wanna, remove it to make it work better, faster, whatever, and that's where we come into the problem. Okay. Let's see, being pinned between equipment, be aware at all times, right? You got the forklift out there, make sure you know who's around you when you're operating it, and then that comes with the material handling as well as the pinned in between, that kind of thing. Make sure you know when people are around when you're handling, when you're using material handling equipment. Never place yourself between moving materials and an immovable structure, okay? Stack materials in a car, basically, okay, that kind of stuff. And then the excavation, we do have a separate, class separately for excavation. You can definitely look that up. Okay, so for excavation sites, the standard is do not work in an unprotected trench. That is in the standard 5 feet deep or more, okay? So there's for our excavation and this is just in general, we have the detailed class when we talk about the different types of protection that you may use in an excavation, sloping or benching, trench boxes, okay? Make sure that proper exits in a excavation using a ladder, stairway, or a properly designed ramp, okay? And really, primary, number one, never go outside the confines of that trench box system, because then, you expose yourself to the material moving again. And then we have some employee requirements. Provide guards on power tools and other equipment with moving parts. Okay, make sure it's a safe environment and safe equipment that your employees are using. Okay, and have some workplace measures to make sure you're not running over each other or dropping material on each other. And designate a competent person. Okay, and we'll go over that in more detail when we talk about scaffolds and excavation, but the competent person is the one that knows all the ins and outs about that operation, that piece of equipment, knows how to operate it, knows how to train people, and most importantly, knows when it's improperly used and knows what to do and make those corrections. So caught in between, caught by training, make sure you review everything in detail, all the study material, because the quiz will involve you giving definitions as well as going into the standards and being able to tell me what the standard is for this particular law. Okay, good luck, and I will talk to you soon.